Cleopatra VII, the last queen of Egypt. Tonight, dear listener, as you nestle into the soft embrace of your blankets, let the worries of the day slip away like sand through your fingers. Picture yourself on the banks of the Nile, where the air hums with the secrets of an ancient world. We're stepping back over 2,000 years to meet a woman whose name still dances on the lips of history, Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt. She was a queen of breathtaking intellect, a ruler whose charm could bend empires, and a dreamer whose ambitions lit up the night sky. So take a deep breath, let your mind wander, and allow her tale to guide you gently toward sleep. Imagine a warm Egyptian night in 69 BCE, the stars shimmering like jewels above the royal palace in Alexandria. Into this world came Cleopatra, born to the Ptolemaic dynasty, a line of Greek rulers who had held Egypt's throne for nearly 300 years. Her father, Ptolemy XII, was a king in name, but his rule was fragile, shadowed by debt and rebellion. Egypt itself was a land of splendor, golden pyramids, bustling markets, and the mighty Nile, but it teetered on the edge, caught between its glorious past and the rising power of Rome. From her earliest days, Cleopatra seemed to sense this tension, as if she was born not just to rule, but to reshape the destiny of her kingdom. As a child, Cleopatra stood apart. She wasn't merely a princess waiting for her crown. She was a scholar, a strategist, a force. While other royals spoke only Greek, she learned the Egyptian language, winning the hearts of her people in a way her ancestors never had. She devoured knowledge, philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, her mind as sharp as the blades that guarded her palace. By her teenage years, she had mastered the art of navigating a court where loyalty was rare and danger lurked in every shadow. She wasn't just preparing to reign, she was preparing to fight. In 51 BCE, at the tender age of 18, Cleopatra took the throne beside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. Tradition demanded they rule together, but harmony was a fleeting dream. Her brother's advisors, power-hungry and cunning, whispered against her, and soon the siblings were locked in a bitter struggle. Cleopatra wanted Egypt to rise again, to reclaim its place among the world's great powers, but Ptolemy's faction forced her out. Exiled and alone, she could have faded into history's margins. Instead, she gathered a band of loyal followers and began to weave a plan, one so bold it would echo through the ages. Then came a twist of fate that changed everything. In 48 BCE, Julius Caesar, Rome's greatest general, landed in Egypt pursuing his enemy Pompey. Cleopatra saw an opportunity where others saw only risk. But how could she reach him, a fugitive queen with enemies at every gate? The answer lies in a story so daring it feels like legend. She slipped into Alexandria, hidden inside a rolled-up carpet, or perhaps a sack carried by a trusted servant. When the bundle was opened before Caesar, there she stood, poised, radiant, unafraid. Her audacity caught him off guard. Her wit held him captive. In that instant, a partnership was born, one that would shake the foundations of two empires. With Caesar's might behind her, Cleopatra returned to power. Her brother's forces fell in a swift, bloody clash, and Ptolemy XIII met his end in the Nile's murky depths. Now queen once more, she ruled alongside her youngest brother, Ptolemy XIV, though her eyes were fixed far beyond Egypt's borders. She followed Caesar to Rome, living as his ally and to some much more. Their son Caesarion was born, a child she hoped would one day bridge east and west. Together they dreamed of a new world, but dreams are fragile things in a city built on betrayal. In 44 BCE, that dream shattered. Caesar, struck down by his own senators, left Cleopatra reeling. Back in Egypt, she mourned the loss of her greatest champion, but she didn't falter. Rome was splintering, and she knew her survival depended on choosing the right ally. Enter Mark Antony, a warrior as fierce as he was passionate, a man whose destiny would soon entwine with hers. In 41 BCE, she sailed to meet him in Tarsus, her golden barge cutting through the water like a vision from myth. Dressed as Aphrodite, goddess of love, she arrived with music drifting on the breeze and the scent of perfume in the air. Antony was spellbound, and their alliance, both political and personal, blossomed. Together, Cleopatra and Antony were unstoppable, or so it seemed. They had 3 children, each a symbol of their shared vision, a world where Egypt and Rome could stand as equals. But Octavian, Caesar's cunning heir, saw their power as a threat. He turned Rome against them, branding Cleopatra a temptress bent on destruction. War loomed on the horizon, and in 31 BCE it arrived at Actium. Their fleets met Octavian's in a clash of steel and sea, but fortune turned against them. Defeated, they fled to Egypt, their grand plans unraveling like threads in the wind. In Alexandria, the end drew near. As Octavian's forces closed in, Antony, thinking Cleopatra lost, took his own life, dying in her arms. She was alone, her city crumbling, her children's future uncertain. Yet even then she defied surrender. On a still day in 30 BCE, she chose her final act. Some say an asp's bite ended her life. Others whisper of poison hidden in a basket of figs. The truth remains a mystery, but her death was a queen's farewell, dramatic, deliberate, and entirely her own. With her, Egypt's independence faded, swallowed by Rome's unyielding grasp. But Cleopatra's story didn't end there. She became more than a queen. She became a legend. Was she the seductress who toppled heroes, or the genius who dared to challenge an empire? Perhaps she was both, or something more. Her life was a tapestry of courage, love, and ambition, woven with threads of triumph and tragedy. She spoke when others stayed silent, fought when others fled, and dreamed when others despaired. Though her kingdom fell, her name rose, carried by the winds of time into eternity. Now, as the Nile flows quietly beneath a blanket of stars, picture Cleopatra's barge drifting into the distance, her spirit as vast as the desert itself. Her tale is one of brilliance and heartbreak, of battles won and lost, of a woman who dared to reach for the impossible. As you slip into sleep, let her story linger, a reminder that even in darkness, a single light can shine forever. Rest well, dear dreamer, and carry her legacy into your dreams. Joan of Arc, the Maid of Orleans. Let's journey back to a time of knights, castles, and a war that seemed without end. Picture the rolling hills of France, where villages nestle among fields and forests, and the air hums with the distant clang of swords. In this turbulent world, a young girl named Joan of Arc rose from obscurity to change the course of history. Her story is one of courage, faith, and tragedy, a tale that will gently guide you into the arms of sleep. So breathe deeply, close your eyes, and let the echoes of her bravery carry you away. Imagine a small village in the heart of France, where the year is 1412 and the land is scarred by a war that has raged for generations. Into this world came Joan, born to humble peasants in the village of Domremy. Her father tended the fields, her mother spun wool, and Joan, well, she was different. From a young age, she was quiet, thoughtful, her eyes often gazing toward the horizon, as if waiting for something only she could see. The Hundred Years' War had cast a shadow over her childhood, with English soldiers ravaging the countryside and the French crown teetering on the edge of collapse. But in the midst of this chaos, Joan carried a secret that would one day shake kingdoms. As she grew, Joan began to hear voices, not the kind that come from mortal lips, but soft, insistent whispers from saints and angels. They spoke of a divine mission to save France, to lift the siege of Orleans, and to see the Dauphin, Charles VII, crowned as the rightful king. At first, she kept these visions to herself, unsure if they were real or the dreams of a restless mind. But the voices grew stronger, more urgent, until she could no longer ignore them. "You are chosen," they said. "You must go." And so, at just 16, Joan set out to fulfill a destiny that seemed impossible for a peasant girl with no sword, no armor, and no place in the world of men. Her first challenge was to reach the Dauphin's court. The path was treacherous, lined with soldiers and spies, but Joan's faith was her shield. She sought help from Robert de Baudricourt, the local garrison commander, who laughed at her request for an escort. "A girl leading an army?" he scoffed. Yet Joan's conviction was unshakable. She returned again and again, her eyes blazing with purpose, until even the hardened commander felt a flicker of doubt. Was she mad, or was there truth in her words? When news came that Orleans was on the brink of surrender, Baudricourt relented, so he gave her a horse, a small guard, and sent her on her way, half expecting never to hear of her again. Joan's journey to Chinon, where Charles VII held court, was a test of will. Dressed in men's clothing for safety, she rode through enemy territory, her heart pounding with each step. When she finally stood before the Dauphin, the court fell silent. Here was a girl, barely more than a child, claiming to be sent by God. Charles, desperate and uncertain, decided to test her. He hid among his courtiers, but Joan walked straight to him, her gaze steady. "I am sent to lead your armies," she said, her voice clear as a bell. "Together we will save France." The room buzzed with disbelief, but something in her words stirred the Dauphin's hope. He gave her a chance, one that would change everything. With a banner in hand and faith in her heart, Joan joined the French army. She was no warrior, but her presence was a spark that ignited the troops. They called her La Pucelle, the maid, and believed she was heaven's answer to their prayers. In May 1429, she led them to Orleans, a city choked by English forces. The siege had dragged on for months, but Joan saw victory where others saw despair. She charged into battle, her banner high, her voice rallying the men. "For France," she cried, and the soldiers followed, their fears melting away. Against all odds, they broke the siege in just 9 days. Orleans was free, and Joan's name became legend. But her path was far from smooth. Over the next year, she led the French to victory after victory, clearing the way for Charles VII's coronation in Reims. On that day, as the crown touched his head, Joan stood beside him, her eyes shining with tears of joy. She had fulfilled her promise, but her voices whispered of more to come. There is still work to be done, they said, and so she pressed on, fighting to drive the English from French soil. Yet as her fame grew, so did the envy of those who feared her power. Whispers of witchcraft and heresy began to swirl, and the tide of war turned against her. In May 1430, during a skirmish at Compiègne, Joan was captured by Burgundian forces, French allies of the English. Her heart sank as the gates of the city closed behind her, but she refused to despair. She was sold to the English for a king's ransom, and they were determined to destroy her. They dragged her to Rouen, where a sham trial awaited. Accused of heresy, witchcraft, and dressing as a man, she faced a panel of hostile judges. Day after day, they questioned her, twisted her words, and sought to break her spirit. But Joan, though young and uneducated, defended herself with a wisdom that left them stunned. "Do you hear the voices still?" they demanded. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady. "They are with me always." The court grew frustrated. They wanted a confession, a sign of weakness. But Joan gave them none. She spoke of her mission, her faith, and her love for France. Even in chains, she was unbreakable. Yet the trial was a farce, its outcome decided long before it began. On May 30th, 1431, they led her to the marketplace, where a stake awaited. As the flames rose, Joan's gaze turned to the sky, her lips moving in silent prayer. Her last word was a whisper, "Jesus," and then she was gone. But Joan's story didn't end in the ashes of Rouen. Her death shocked France, and her memory became a rallying cry. The war she had helped turn in France's favor continued, and within decades, the English were driven out. In 1456, a retrial cleared her name, declaring her innocent of all charges. Centuries later, in 1920, the Catholic Church canonized her as Saint Joan, a martyr and a symbol of unwavering faith. Her life, though brief, left a mark that time could not erase. She was a girl who dared to dream, a warrior who fought with heart, and a saint whose light still shines in the darkest corners of history. Now, as the stars twinkle above the fields of France, imagine Joan's banner fluttering in the breeze, her courage as timeless as the night sky. Her tale is one of bravery and sacrifice, of a girl who listened to her heart and changed the world. As you drift into sleep, let her story linger, a reminder that even in the face of impossible odds, one voice can echo through the ages. Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen who shaped an era. Let's drift back to a time of velvet gowns, flickering candlelight, and the distant murmur of a bustling court. Imagine the rolling green hills of England, where the scent of blooming roses mingles with the crisp autumn air. In this world of kings and queens, one figure rises above the rest, Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen. Her life is a tapestry woven with threads of courage, intellect, and mystery, a story perfect for guiding you into a peaceful slumber. So breathe deeply, let your eyelids grow heavy, and allow Elizabeth's tale to carry you gently into the night. A princess born amidst storms. Picture a golden September day in 1533 when a child was born in the grand halls of Greenwich Palace. Her name was Elizabeth, daughter of the formidable King Henry VIII and his bold second wife, Anne Boleyn. The court held its breath as the news spread, not of a longed-for prince, but of a princess. Henry, consumed by his desire for a male heir, turned away in disappointment. Yet, in this tiny girl with her mother's dark eyes and her father's fiery spirit, destiny had planted the seed of greatness. Elizabeth's early years unfolded like a shadowed dream. When she was barely 2, tragedy struck. Her mother, Anne, was accused of treason and beheaded at the Tower of London. The executioner's axe cast a long shadow over Elizabeth's life, stripping her of her title and banishing her from her father's favor. She was sent to the countryside, to quiet manors like Hatfield House, where the wind whispered through ancient oaks and the halls echoed with the footsteps of tutors and servants. There, far from the glittering court, Elizabeth found solace in books. Her sharp mind drank in Latin, Greek, French, and Italian, while her hands danced across the strings of a lute. She studied the works of philosophers and poets, her curiosity a flickering flame that no exile could extinguish. Henry VIII's death in 1547 brought little stability. Elizabeth's half-brother, Edward, a frail boy of 9, took the throne, his reign guided by ambitious nobles. When Edward succumbed to illness 6 years later, the crown passed to Mary, Elizabeth's half-sister. Mary, a fervent Catholic, saw the Protestant Elizabeth as a rival, a spark that could ignite rebellion. In 1554, suspicion led Mary to imprison Elizabeth in the Tower of London. Imagine the young princess stepping into that grim fortress, the iron gates clanging shut behind her. The air was damp and cold, the walls scarred with the names of those who had come before. Elizabeth, just 20, faced the specter of execution, yet she held her composure. With careful words and unwavering resolve, she outlasted the accusations, emerging from the tower as a survivor. When Mary died in 1558, the crown, worn and heavy, passed to Elizabeth, and at 25 she ascended as England's queen, a reign of wisdom and triumph. Elizabeth stepped into a kingdom teetering on the edge. England was a patchwork of rival faiths, Protestants and Catholics clashing like storm clouds, its coffers nearly empty, its people weary from years of upheaval. But Elizabeth, with her piercing gaze and steady hand, was no ordinary ruler. She gathered advisers like Sir William Cecil, whose loyalty became her anchor, and set about mending her fractured realm. Her first triumph was the Elizabethan religious settlement, a delicate dance of compromise. She established the Church of England as a middle path, soothing tensions and weaving her people into a fragile unity. The church bells rang out across the land, a sound as calming as a lullaby, signaling peace at last. Yet beyond England's shores, danger loomed. Spain, led by the stern King Philip II, once Mary's husband, coveted England's independence. In 1588, he launched the Spanish Armada, a fleet of 130 ships bristling with cannons aimed at England's heart. The nation held its breath as the enemy's sails darkened the horizon. Elizabeth, undaunted, donned a silver breastplate and rode to Tilbury to address her troops. Her voice cut through the wind. "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England, too." Her words were a spark, igniting courage in every soldier. When the battle came, England's smaller, swifter ships outmaneuvered the Armada, aided by fierce storms that seemed sent by fate. The Spanish fleet was scattered, and England rejoiced, a victory that would echo through time. Elizabeth's reign was not only defined by war. Her court was a garden where art and exploration bloomed. She adorned herself in silks and pearls, her presence a beacon of elegance. The theatres of London hummed with life as playwrights like William Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe spun tales of love, tragedy, and wonder. Imagine the soft rustle of costumes, the murmur of audiences entranced by Romeo and Juliet or Dr. Faustus. Beyond the stage, explorers like Sir Francis Drake sailed into uncharted waters, their ships cutting through the waves like threads stitching England to the world. Elizabeth's patronage turned her reign into a golden age, a time when the air seemed alive with possibility. The enigma of the Virgin Queen. For all her public triumphs, Elizabeth's private life remained a riddle wrapped in silk. Suitors from France, Spain, and beyond sought her hand, their envoys filling her court with promises of alliance. Yet Elizabeth turned them all away, her smile enigmatic, her resolve unshaken. Some whispered of her love for Robert Dudley, her childhood companion and master of the horse. Their bond was undeniable. His dark eyes met hers across crowded banquets, their laughter mingling in the halls of Whitehall. But when scandal touched Dudley's name after his wife's mysterious death, Elizabeth stepped back, choosing her throne over her heart. She declared herself the Virgin Queen, wedded only to England, a choice that kept her power her own. Her court was a world of splendor. Picture the glow of chandeliers, the scent of lavender drifting from embroidered gowns, the strains of a viol weaving through the air. Elizabeth delighted in masks and dances, her wit as sharp as her jeweled rings. She was a ruler who could charm a foreign ambassador one moment and outsmart a scheming noble the next. Her refusal to marry became her strength, a shield against those who sought to control her. And though her heart remained her own, she poured her love into her people, earning their devotion in return. A legacy that endures. As the years wore on, Elizabeth's auburn hair faded to silver. Her steps grew slower, but her spirit burned bright. She ruled for 44 years, steering England through storms and into a dawn of prosperity. When she passed in 1603 at Richmond Palace, the nation wept for a queen who had become its soul. Her body was laid to rest in Westminster Abbey, her tomb a quiet testament to a life extraordinary. But her true legacy lived on in the strength of a nation she fortified, in the arts she nurtured, in the dreams she inspired. Now, as the moonlight spills over England's fields and the stars gleam above, imagine Elizabeth's crown resting on a cushion of velvet, her story woven into the fabric of time. She was a woman who defied a world that sought to define her, a queen whose reign lit the way for centuries to come. As you drift toward sleep, let her tale wrap around you like a warm cloak, a reminder that even in the darkest nights, resilience can shine. Catherine the Great, the empress who shaped a nation, a whisper of destiny. Close your eyes and imagine a land of endless snow where the wind carries secrets through the spires of golden palaces. Tonight, dear listener, we step into the world of 18th century Russia, a realm of ambition, intrigue, and transformation. At its heart stands a woman whose name echoes through time, Catherine the Great. Born a modest German princess, she became the architect of an empire, her story unfolding like a tapestry of courage and cunning. As you settle into the softness of your bed, let her journey draw you in, a tale to spark your curiosity and guide you gently into dreams. From Sophie to Catherine, picture a small German town in 1729, where a girl named Sophie Friederike August von Anhalt-Zerbst took her first breath. Her family was noble, but far from grand, tucked away in the quiet corners of Prussia. Sophie's mother, Johanna, was a woman of fierce ambition, her eyes set on a glittering future for her daughter. As a child, Sophie was bright and restless, her hands always clutching a book, her mind racing with ideas. She dreamed of a life beyond the gray stone walls of her home, though she could scarcely imagine the destiny awaiting her. That destiny arrived when she was just 14. Empress Elizabeth of Russia, a ruler with a taste for grandeur, sought a bride for her nephew Peter, the heir to the Russian throne. Sophie and her mother traveled across Europe, their carriage rattling over frozen roads, until they reached St. Petersburg. The city dazzled her, its canals shimmering under the pale sun, its palaces alive with whispers of power. There she met Peter, a strange and childish young man who preferred toy soldiers to conversation. Undeterred, Sophie embraced her new world. She learned Russian, adopted the Orthodox faith, and took the name Catherine. What began as a duty soon became her stage. What would she make of it? A crown won in shadows. Catherine's marriage to Peter was a fragile thread, stretched thin by his oddities and her resolve. When Peter became Tsar Peter III in 1762, his reign was a disaster. He scorned Russia, idolized Prussia, and made enemies at every turn. Catherine, now 33, had spent years quietly building her own power, winning the hearts of nobles, soldiers, and scholars. She saw the cracks in Peter's rule and sensed her moment, but how would she seize it? The answer came in a daring coup. In June 1762, with the imperial guard at her side, Catherine acted. Imagine her astride a horse, clad in a green uniform, her voice steady as she rallied her supporters. The streets of St. Petersburg buzzed with excitement as Peter was deposed, his reign ending in a blur of confusion and betrayal. Days later, he was dead, some say by accident, others by design. Catherine emerged as empress, her hands steady on the reins of a restless empire. How would she wield this hard-won power? The answer lies in the years ahead. A reign of vision and victory. Catherine's Russia was a giant stirring from slumber, its potential vast but untamed. She envisioned a modern empire, one to rival the courts of Paris and Vienna. With a quill in hand and advisors like Grigory Potemkin by her side, she set to work. She reformed laws, inspired by the Enlightenment thinkers she admired. Voltaire called her the Star of the North. She built schools, wrote books for children, and turned her court into a haven for art and ideas. But could she truly change a land so steeped in tradition? Her ambitions stretched beyond Russia's borders. Through wars and diplomacy, she claimed Crimea, carved up Poland, and pushed her empire's edges ever outward. Her armies triumphed, her ships sailed new seas, and her name grew fearsome. Yet not all was golden. A rebel named Pugachev rose up, claiming to be the true Tsar, and the serfs cried out for freedom she couldn't grant. Catherine crushed the rebellion, her resolve unshaken, but the echoes of unrest lingered. What price would her greatness demand? The heart of an empress. Catherine's private life was as captivating as her rule. She never remarried, but her lovers, bold, brilliant men, filled her days with passion and purpose. None shone brighter than Grigory Potemkin, a soldier with a poet's soul. Their love burned fiercely. Together, They dreamed of empires stretching to the Mediterranean. Even when romance faded, their bond held strong, a partnership of trust and triumph. What drove her to these men, and they to her? Europe buzzed with tales of her affairs, but Catherine laughed at the rumors. "If I have a fault," she wrote, "it is that I am too human." Her son Paul, born of her unhappy marriage to Peter, grew distant, his resentment a quiet storm. She was an empress, yes, but also a woman, longing, fierce, and unafraid. Her letters reveal a mind alive with wit and warmth, a soul that balanced power with yearning. What secrets did she keep in those final years? An enduring flame. By 1796, Catherine's hair was silver, her body weary, but her legacy blazed. She had ruled for 34 years, lifting Russia into a new age. Her death left a nation transformed, stronger, richer, more alive. The Hermitage, brimming with her art, stood as a testament to her taste. Her laws and lands spoke of her will. Yet shadows remained, the serfs still toiled, and her son Paul undid much of her work. Had she built a dream too grand to last? Picture her now, her portrait gazing over St. Petersburg, the city she loved. The snow falls silently, the domes glow in the dusk, and her story lingers in the air. Catherine the Great, a princess who became a titan, a woman who bent history to her will. As you drift toward sleep, let her tale wrap around you, a thread of wonder and strength. What will you dream of in her empire of the night? Marie Curie, the scientist who illuminated the world. A flicker in the dark. Picture a woman bent over her workbench, her hands steady, her eyes fixed on a faint glow in a glass vial. This is the world of Marie Curie, a place where curiosity met courage and science became a beacon in the dark. Her story is one of discovery, sacrifice, and a light that still shines today. So breathe deeply, let your mind wander, and allow Marie's journey to guide you gently toward sleep. A spark of curiosity. Picture a small house in Warsaw, Poland, where in 1867 a girl named Maria Skłodowska was born. The youngest of five, she grew up in a family that prized learning, though their pockets were often empty. Her father, a teacher, filled the rooms with books and dreams, while her mother's quiet strength held them together. But tragedy shadowed Maria's childhood. Her mother's death when she was just 10 left an ache that never quite faded. Yet even in sorrow, Maria's mind burned bright. She devoured science and mathematics, her curiosity a flame that no hardship could snuff out. What would this spark lead her to? In a time when women were rarely seen in universities, Maria's path was steep. She worked as a governess, her wages sent to Paris, where her sister Bronisława studied medicine. At night, she pored over textbooks, her breath clouding in the cold attic. Finally, in 1891, she followed her sister to the City of Light. There, at the Sorbonne, she became Marie, her name softened like the glow of a distant star. She lived in a tiny garret, surviving on bread and tea, her days a blur of lectures and loneliness. But in the hum of the laboratory, she found her home. What discoveries awaited her there? A partnership of minds. In 1894, fate, or perhaps something more, brought Marie to Pierre Curie, a physicist with a gentle smile and a brilliant mind. He was captivated by her focus, her quiet fire. They married a year later, their love as much a meeting of intellects as of hearts. Together, They turned a damp shed into a laboratory, its walls lined with dreams. What would they uncover in that humble space? Their quest began with a mystery, the strange rays emitted by uranium. Marie named it radioactivity, a word that would echo through history. She worked tirelessly, her hands stained with chemicals, her body weary but unyielding. In 1898, they announced the discovery of polonium, named for her beloved Poland, and then radium, an element that glowed like a secret in the dark. But their triumph came at a cost. The Curies refused to patent their findings, choosing knowledge over wealth, and as they labored, unseen particles seeped into their bones, a silent price for their passion. How would this invisible force shape their lives? A light in the shadow. In 1903, Marie became the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, sharing the honor with Pierre and Henri Becquerel. But joy was fleeting. 3 years later, Pierre was killed in a street accident, his skull crushed by a carriage wheel. Marie's world shattered. She wrote in her diary, "I have lost my beloved Pierre, and with him all hope and all support for the rest of my life." Yet she pressed on, her grief a heavy cloak she refused to shed. She took his place at the Sorbonne, the first woman to teach there, her voice steady as she spoke of atoms and energy. What strength did she draw upon in those dark days? Her work never stopped. In 1911, she won a second Nobel Prize, this time in chemistry, for isolating radium. She was the first person ever to win two Nobels, her name etched in gold. But the world was not always kind. Scandal swirled around her friendship with a married colleague, and the press hounded her. Marie retreated to her lab, her sanctuary. There, amidst beakers and burners, she found peace. What drove her to keep going, even when the world seemed against her? A legacy of light. When World War I erupted, Marie saw a new way to serve. She designed mobile X-ray units, dubbed Little Curies, and drove them to the front lines. In muddy fields and makeshift hospitals, she trained nurses to use the machines, saving countless lives. Her daughter Irene, just 17, worked beside her, their bond a thread of strength. But the war took its toll, and so did the radium she loved. Her health faltered, her eyesight dimmed, yet she never complained. What kept her spirit alight? Marie's final years were a quiet hum of work and wonder. She traveled to America, where crowds adored her, and she raised funds for her Radium Institute in Paris. She mentored young scientists, her hands guiding theirs as they peered into microscopes. On July 4th, 1934, she slipped away, her body finally succumbing to the radiation that had been her life's work. She was laid to rest beside Pierre, her name immortal. But what of her legacy? Today, Marie Curie's light shines on. Her discoveries unlocked the secrets of the atom, paving the way for treatments that heal and technologies that power our world. She remains a symbol of perseverance, a woman who faced down doubt and danger with grace. Her story whispers to us across the years. Curiosity is a gift, and courage its companion. As you drift toward sleep, let her tale linger, a reminder that even in the darkest nights, a single spark can change everything. Indira Gandhi, the Iron Lady of India. Imagine a land where the air is thick with the scent of jasmine and the hum of ancient chants, where the echoes of a 1,000-year-old civilization meet the clamor of a young democracy. This is India in the mid-20th century, a nation awakening from colonial slumber, its future uncertain, its people yearning for a leader to guide them into a new era. Into this world stepped a woman whose name would become synonymous with both strength and controversy, Indira Gandhi. Her story is one of power, resilience, and a legacy as complex as the country she led. Let us journey through her life, where each chapter reveals a new layer of the woman they called the Iron Lady, a childhood in the shadow of revolution. Picture a grand house in Allahabad, where in 1917 a girl named Indira Priyadarshini Nehru was born. Her family was no ordinary one. Her grandfather, Motilal Nehru, was a towering figure in the fight for India's freedom, and her father, Jawaharlal Nehru, was destined to become the nation's first prime minister. Indira's childhood was steeped in politics. The walls of her home buzzed with the voices of revolutionaries, and the air was thick with dreams of independence. But it was not a fairy tale. Her mother's illness cast a long shadow, and the British police were a constant presence, their raids a reminder of the price her family paid for their defiance. As a young girl, Indira learned early that power came with sacrifice. She watched her father imprisoned time and again, his letters her only link to him. Yet these hardships forged her spirit. She organized children into protest groups, her small hands clutching banners as she marched through the streets. Education took her to Switzerland and England, where she studied at Oxford, her mind sharpening like a blade. But India's call was too strong to ignore. She returned home, her path already entwined with the nation's destiny. What role would she play in the drama unfolding around her? A reluctant heir to power. Indira's entry into politics was not a blaze of ambition, but a quiet step into her father's shadow. In 1942, she married Feroz Gandhi, a fiery journalist with a shared passion for India's freedom. Together, they navigated the turbulent years of independence, their home a hub for political discourse. But tragedy struck early. Feroz's death in 1960 left her a widow with two sons, Rajiv and Sanjay. Grief could have broken her, but Indira's resolve only deepened. She became her father's confidant, her presence a steadying force as he led a newborn nation. When Jawaharlal Nehru passed away in 1964, India mourned and the Congress Party sought a successor. Indira, now 47, was thrust into the spotlight. She became Minister of Information and Broadcasting, her voice calm yet commanding. But the whispers grew louder. Could she lead? In 1966, after the sudden death of Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri, the party turned to her. She was an unlikely choice, a woman in a man's world, a quiet figure in a land of loud voices. Yet she accepted the mantle, her eyes steady, her heart racing. What would her leadership bring to a nation at a crossroads? The rise of the Iron Lady. Indira's early years as prime minister were a trial by fire. India was a patchwork of languages, religions, and ambitions, its economy fragile, its borders tense. She moved swiftly, her policies bold and unapologetic. In 1969, she nationalized 14 major banks, a move that sent shockwaves through the elite, but won her the adoration of the masses. Garibi Hatao, remove poverty, became her rallying cry, her voice echoing across the fields and factories. She launched the Green Revolution, transforming India from a land of famine to a nation of surplus. But could she hold the reins of a country so vast and varied? Her strength was tested in 1971 when war erupted with Pakistan over the birth of Bangladesh. Indira stood firm, her strategy sharp, her resolve unbroken. India's victory was swift, and with it, her legend grew. She was no longer just a leader. She was Durga, the warrior goddess, her image etched in the minds of millions. But power, as she would learn, was a double edged sword. What price would she pay for her triumphs? The dark days of the emergency. In 1975, Indira's world tilted. A court ruling threatened to unseat her, and protests swelled across the nation. Fearful of losing control, she made a choice that would haunt her legacy. She declared a state of emergency, suspending civil liberties, censoring the press, and jailing her opponents. The streets fell silent, the prisons filled, and the air grew heavy with unease. For 21 months, India held its breath. Indira ruled with an iron hand, her son Sanjay by her side, his influence growing like a shadow. But the people's love turned to resentment, their whispers of discontent rising like a tide. What had driven her to this fateful decision? In 1977, she lifted the emergency and called for elections, confident of victory. But the tide had turned. The Janata Party swept to power, and Indira, once invincible, tasted defeat. She retreated to her home, the weight of her choices pressing down like a storm. Yet even in exile, her spirit flickered. Could she rise again from the ashes of her own making? A return and a reckoning. India's political winds shifted once more, and in 1980, Indira returned to power, her voice ringing out across the nation. But the challenges had multiplied. In Punjab, a separatist movement simmered, its leader, Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale, defiant in the Golden Temple. Indira faced an impossible choice: peace or force. In June 1984, she ordered Operation Blue Star, sending troops into the sacred shrine. The battle was fierce, the casualties high, and the scars deep. Indira knew the risks. Her advisors warned of vengeance. But she stood by her decision, her gaze steady, her heart heavy. What fate awaited her in the days to come? On October 31st, 1984, as she walked through her garden, her Sikh bodyguards, men she had trusted, turned their guns on her. 30 bullets tore through her body, and India gasped in horror. Her death sent shockwaves through the nation, sparking riots and revealing the fractures she had tried to heal. Her son Rajiv took the helm, but the void she left was vast. Had her life's work been undone in a single, violent moment? A legacy of strength and shadow. Indira Gandhi's story is one of contrasts. A leader who lifted millions from poverty, yet wielded power with a heavy hand. A woman who broke barriers, yet faced the ire of those she sought to lead. She was India's first female prime minister, a symbol of strength in a patriarchal world, yet her choices remain debated to this day. Her policies shaped modern India. Her courage inspired generations, but her missteps serve as a cautionary tale. What lessons can we draw from her life? As you reflect on Indira's journey, let her story settle like a whisper in the night. She was a daughter, a mother, a leader, flawed yet fearless, her legacy as enduring as the land she loved. Her life reminds us that power is a fragile gift, one that demands both wisdom and humility. So as you close your eyes, let the echoes of her voice guide you into dreams, where the past and present intertwine. What will you take from her tale as you drift into sleep? Sojourner Truth, the voice of freedom. Picture a small cabin in the quiet hills of New York, where the air is thick with the scent of pine and the distant hum of a river. In this humble place, in the year 1797, a girl named Isabella Baumfree was born into a world that sought to silence her. But Isabella would not be silenced. She would grow to become Sojourner Truth, a woman whose voice would echo through history, breaking chains and shattering barriers. Her story is one of resilience, faith, and a relentless pursuit of justice, a tale that unfolds like a river, winding through the darkest valleys toward the light of freedom. A childhood in chains. Imagine a young girl, barely 5 years old, standing in the cold shadow of an auction block. Isabella's first memory was not of lullabies or laughter, but of the auctioneer's gavel as she was sold away from her parents. Her new master spoke only English, while she knew only Dutch, the language of her enslaved family. The words were foreign, the faces stern, and the world around her a blur of confusion and fear. She was beaten for misunderstandings, her small hands trembling as she tried to learn the tasks demanded of her. But even in those early years, a spark of defiance flickered within her. What strength could a child find in such a place? As she grew, Isabella was sold again and again, each new master a chapter of hardship. She toiled in fields under the blazing sun, her back bent, her spirit tested. Yet she learned to survive. She found solace in the stories of her mother, who spoke of a God who watched over them, a God who would one day set them free. Isabella clung to that promise, her faith a quiet ember in the dark. But freedom seemed a distant dream, especially when she was forced into marriage with another slave, her children born into the same chains that bound her. How could she break free when the world itself seemed forged in iron? A journey to freedom. In 1826, the winds of change began to stir. New York was on the verge of abolishing slavery, but Isabella's master refused to honor the law. He promised her freedom, then snatched it away like a cruel jest. Isabella's heart hardened with resolve. One early morning, with her infant daughter in her arms, she walked out of the house and into the dawn. She found refuge with a Quaker family who bought her freedom for $20, a small price for a life. But freedom was not yet complete. Her son, Peter, had been sold to a plantation in Alabama, his small face haunting her dreams. What mother could rest while her child remained in chains? With a fierce determination, Isabella took her fight to the courts, a rare act for a black woman in those times. She stood before judges, her voice steady, her eyes unyielding. "That boy is mine," she declared, "and I will have him back." Against all odds, she won. Peter was returned to her, his small hand clasped in hers as they walked away from the courthouse. It was a victory not just for her, but for every mother torn from her child. Yet Isabella knew her journey was far from over. What path would she choose next? A new name, a new mission. In 1843, Isabella Baumfree stood at a crossroads. She had found faith in a new way, her soul stirred by visions and a calling she could not ignore. On a quiet morning, she left her past behind and took a new name, Sojourner Truth. "I will travel and speak the truth," she vowed, her voice a whisper to the wind. She became a wandering preacher, her words a balm for the weary, a fire for the oppressed. She spoke of God's love, of freedom, of a world where justice was not a dream, but a right. But could her voice truly make a difference? Her travels took her to the heart of the abolitionist movement, where she met giants like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman. Though she could not read or write, her mind was sharp, her spirit unbreakable. She stood on stages, her tall frame commanding attention, her words cutting through the noise like a blade. "I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns," she declared, "and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman?" Her speech at the Women's Rights Convention in 1851 became a clarion call, her question echoing through the halls of history. What power lay in those simple words? A life of purpose. Sojourner Truth's voice became a force that could not be ignored. She traveled across the North, her speeches drawing crowds, her presence a testament to the strength of the human spirit. During the Civil War, she recruited black soldiers for the Union Army, her eyes blazing with the hope of freedom. She met President Lincoln, who called her Auntie, though she corrected him with a smile, "I am Sojourner Truth." Even in her later years, she fought for land grants for freed slaves, her heart aching for those still struggling. What drove her to keep fighting, even as her body grew frail? Her final years were spent in Battle Creek, Michigan, where she lived with her daughters. Though her travels slowed, her spirit never dimmed. She continued to speak, to write, to inspire. On November 26th, 1883, she passed away, her name already etched in the annals of history. Thousands mourned her, their tears a tribute to a woman who had given her life to the cause of freedom. But her story did not end there. What legacy did she leave behind? A voice that echoes still, Sojourner. Truth's life was a testament to the power of one voice, one heart, one unyielding will. She rose from the depths of slavery to become a beacon of hope, her words a rallying cry for justice. Her fight for abolition and women's rights laid the groundwork for generations to come, her name whispered in the halls of power and the quiet corners of classrooms. She was a mother, a preacher, a warrior, her life a song of freedom that still resonates today. As you reflect on her journey, let her story settle like a gentle breeze in the night. Sojourner Truth taught us that truth is not just a word, but a force, one that can break chains and build bridges. Her legacy reminds us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the strength to speak when others fall silent. So as you close your eyes, let the echoes of her voice guide you into dreams where the past and present intertwine. What will you take from her tale as you drift into sleep? Malala Yousafzai, the girl who defied the darkness. Imagine a valley cradled by towering mountains, where the air is crisp and the rivers run clear, but where fear lingers like a shadow. This is the Swat Valley in Pakistan, a place of breathtaking beauty and, for a time, heartbreaking oppression. Into this world, in 1997, a girl named Malala Yousafzai was born. Her name means grief-stricken, but her life would become a testament to hope, courage, and the unbreakable power of a single voice. Her story is one of defiance against tyranny, a journey from a small classroom to the global stage, and a reminder that even the youngest among us can change the world. A childhood in the valley of fear. Picture a small house in Mingora, where Malala grew up surrounded by the love of her family. Her father, Ziauddin, was a teacher and a dreamer, his heart set on educating the children of Swat. Her mother, Tor Pekai, was a quiet strength, her hands always busy, her smile a balm. Malala was their first child, and from the start she was different. She didn't cry at birth, she simply looked around, as if already curious about the world. Her father saw in her a spark, a light that would one day shine far beyond the valley. But as Malala grew, so did the shadows. The Taliban, a militant group, began to creep into Swat, their presence like a storm cloud over the mountains. They banned music, closed schools, and forbade girls from learning. Malala, just 11, watched as her world shrank. Her father's school, once a haven of laughter and learning, became a target. Yet even as fear gripped the valley, Malala's voice refused to be silenced. She began writing a blog for the BBC under a pseudonym, her words a lifeline to the outside world. "I am afraid," she wrote, "but I will not let them win." What courage did it take for a child to stand against such darkness? A bullet and a promise. In 2012, the unthinkable happened. On a quiet afternoon, as Malala rode the bus home from school, a masked gunman boarded and demanded, "Who is Malala?" A single shot rang out, and she fell, her blood staining the seat beside her. The bullet pierced her skull, grazing her brain, and the world held its breath. She was just 15, a girl who dared to dream of a future where every child could learn. The Taliban claimed responsibility, their message clear: defy us and pay the price. But as Malala lay in a hospital bed, her life hanging by a thread, a different message began to spread. What would become of the girl who refused to be silent? Miraculously, Malala survived. She awoke in a hospital in Birmingham, England, her body weak but her spirit unbroken. The attack had shattered her skull, but it had also shattered the silence. News of her story spread like wildfire, igniting outrage and admiration across the globe. She became a symbol, not of victimhood, but of resilience. As she healed, her resolve deepened. "They thought a bullet would silence me," she later said, "but they failed." Instead, she emerged stronger, her voice louder, her mission clearer. What path would she choose in the wake of such violence? A global stage and a Nobel dream. Malala's recovery was a journey of pain and perseverance. She underwent multiple surgeries, her face forever marked by the scars of survival. Yet even as she learned to smile again, her thoughts turned outward. She refused to hide. Instead, she stepped into the light. In 2013, on her 16th birthday, she stood before the United Nations, her voice steady, her words a clarion call. "One child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world," she declared, her eyes shining with conviction. The world listened, captivated by a girl who had faced death and emerged with a message of hope. Her activism took her to the farthest corners of the earth. She met with world leaders, spoke at conferences, and sat with refugees in camps, her presence a beacon for those who had lost everything. In 2014, at just 17, she became the youngest person ever to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. The honor was not just for her, she insisted, but for every child denied an education. She used her platform to launch the Malala Fund, a charity dedicated to giving girls access to schools. But even as she soared, the threats remained. The Taliban still sought her silence, their hatred a shadow she could not escape. What drove her to keep speaking, even in the face of danger? A legacy of light. Today, Malala Yousafzai is a name known around the world. She has graduated from Oxford University, her mind as sharp as ever, her heart still tethered to the valley where she was born. She continues to fight for education, her voice a steady drumbeat in the fight for justice. Her memoir, I Am Malala, has inspired millions, and her story has been told in films and songs. Yet for all her fame, she remains grounded, her laughter quick, her humility intact. She is a daughter, a sister, a friend, a young woman who loves cricket and chocolate, who dreams of returning to Swat one day when peace has finally come. As you reflect on Malala's journey, let her story settle like a soft whisper in the night. She teaches us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the will to act despite it. Her life reminds us that education is not just a right, but a revolution, one that can lift nations and heal wounds. So as you close your eyes, let the echoes of her voice guide you into dreams where the future is bright and every child holds a book. What will you take from her tale as you drift into sleep?